All right, good morning. Thank you for joining us here at Inspire the Spirit. So it's our last Wednesday of August. Starting in September, we have 4 Wednesdays after Labor Day. We're going to do a little 4-week series of taking a deeper dive and a look into Jesus and who Jesus was. I figure since we're here to inspire the Spirit and increase our lives and develop our relationship with Christ, talking about Jesus is probably a good subject. So we will dive into that deeper next month when we come back from the break. So today we're going to kind of do a preview and lead into that series by asking a question: do we get him? When I say do we get him, I'm talking about, do we fully understand who he was? Do we really comprehend what Jesus did? Do we get him? Now, this is really a flip side from a marketing campaign that started last year in 2022. We've all heard of the He Gets Us. Well, if he gets us today, do we get him? He understands us. And that marketing campaign started last year at the end, towards start of the NFL playoffs. They spent $100 million running these ad campaigns and ran 2 of them during the Super Bowl. And if you remember, they're black and white photos of current social events, things that are on the forefront of people's minds. And the message was to relate to young people who have drifted away from church and gotten less involved in reading the Bible daily, to try to drive a point home that the life that Jesus led is very relative to even the social events and issues of the day and how they tie and communicate to each other. That was interesting that ad campaign drew criticism from both the far left and the far right. Both sides saw some good in it, and yet both sides had some critical viewpoints of it. And I figure if you've done anything to really rattle the cages of 2 extremes, you're probably doing something right. You probably have a good message to share if you can touch both sides of the spectrum. So let's dive into today's Do We Get Him? You see, Jesus lived a life like no other person ever, past, present, or future. And we can say that because we can look at people that lived in the past and are now gone. We can look at people living in the present. Sometimes mentally we try to live in the future, but we physically can't live there. But Jesus, who is still alive today, always existed. He's always been in the past. He's always in our present. And he's even in our future. He's always ahead of us, clearing the path, making things happen to the benefit of our good. His life had 2 main themes. He always showed compassion and forgiveness. No one lived a life like Jesus when it comes to compassion and forgiveness. How many of us in this room can honestly raise our hands and say, my entire life has been devoted to showing compassion and forgiveness to those around me? Now, when Jesus walked on this earth, some people were really curious. It was kind of like the circus coming to town, large crowds, lots of anticipation, and people just wanted to kind of see the show. Some rejected him. They didn't like the attention he was drawing to himself and the fact that the crowds went. So some people kind of just, we just kind of reject the mob. Some people got really angry. He hung out with the wrong people. He didn't do things the way they thought it should have been done. And some disputed his very claims that he was the true living Son of God, and they just disputed him, and therefore many people walked away and missed out on the greatest opportunity of their lives. But Jesus had a singular mission when he was here, to love like nobody else. And he invited everyone to follow. There was no exclusion. Everyone was welcome to follow him. And he always stopped and he always listened. He was never too busy, and he was never in a hurry, and he rejected no one that came to him. He always had open arms and time to discuss and to talk and to visit with everybody on a personal level. And along the way, he performed wondrous miracles. And most importantly, he was the only one who had the authority to forgive us of our sins. In John 6:35, Jesus declared, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." Now, when they crucified Jesus and took him in front of the courts, all kinds of charges, they really only nailed him on three things. There was three charges that stuck that they took him to the Roman courts to get him crucified. Number one was healing on the Sabbath. You weren't supposed to work on the Sabbath day. You were to keep it holy and rest. But Jesus was always working. He was always showing compassion and healing for people, and he forgave people even on the Sabbath. And they charged him with that. They also charged him for basically loving sinners. If he was truly a rabbi and a spiritual teacher, he shouldn't have been hanging out with tax collectors and prostitutes and the oppressed and the outcast. And yet he always dined and welcomed the outcast to his table. And the third charge they charged him with was blasphemy. And that was the biggest one. They did not like the fact that he claimed to be exactly who he was, the Messiah and the Son of God. You see, Jesus came to satisfy our need for what we are all missing. Everybody's missing something in their heart until they come to know Jesus. Did he come to provide all of our provisions and meet our needs? Yes. Provided food. He fed 5,000. He brought health. He healed those that had leprosy, and he let crippled and lame to walk again. And he always provided us with the human emotion of love. But above all, he gave us atonement. Atonement for our sins, that we could no longer be separated from God the Father. Now, we're all hungry for something. Everybody gets up every morning hungry to do or to feel or to accomplish something. So what are you hungry for today? You may be hungry for the donut in front of you. You just may have that physical hunger need. And all you care about when you get up is, where's your next meal? What am I going to have? Some people will eat breakfast and talk about what they're going to have for dinner that night. We're always pursuing hunger. But we're not talking about physical hunger. Some of us are looking for love, right? Looking for love in all the wrong places. You want to age yourself. But we're always looking for that personal gratification. And some of us are looking for acceptance. We just want to be part of the in crowd. We want those around us to acknowledge and accept us. Some are looking for fame. We want everybody to know our name, right? We want everybody to see us, to see our social posts, and to acknowledge that we exist. But how many of us are truly wake up every day thinking about our salvation? That our salvation is secured through the blood of Christ. And unfortunately, a lot of people are missing out on that. Do we get him? Do we understand he came to provide so much more than just this short temporal life we live here on earth? He came to provide us a spiritual dwelling with him for eternity. Have you ever had a sleepless night? Anybody ever had a night where you just toss and turn? You stare at this, got a lot of hands today, a lot of tired people. You stare at the ceiling fan. Your mind cannot turn off. And you go down that downward spiral of connecting dots. Well, because of this means this. Oh, that's going to lead to this. And all of a sudden, you go from something as simple as, did I take the trash out, to, man, I might lose my job, that I'm homeless, that I'm living under a bridge, and it's going to be really cold this winter. And we toss and turn. And sometimes we don't even know why we're restless. And one thing, when you're restless, no one else stays up with you. So you just kind of toss and turn and stare. You might get up, walk the hallways of your house, go sit in another room. If you're like me and a lot of people, you might go open the refrigerator door for no reason other than you just don't know why. But the key is, when we are all in the dark is when Jesus draws the closest. And not just at night when it's dark, but even in our lives, when we're going through a dark time in life, when we're going through trials and tribulation, Jesus truly is drawing the closest to us, because he calls his sheep by name. When you're restless, when you're tossing and turning, God may be prompting you to just have a discussion, to just talk to him. He knows, he listens, we should talk to him. Those are the times that we need to become consciously aware, I'm being prompted. I need to pray. I just need to seek out God's peace in this moment, because he's calling me to rest in him, to turn my problems over to him, and just to sit in awe of his power and his glory. In John chapter 10, verse 7, therefore Jesus said again, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. Now the sheep would go out and feed all day. They'd bring them in, they'd set up these pens in the field, and they'd run them in the pens to be safe at night, to keep them together. And the pens had one gate, and you'd close that gate. And that gate was the only way into the safety and protection of the pen, for the flock to be together. And God's love is just like that. He wants to invite us into that pen at night. And the gate, Jesus said, I am the gate for the sheep. He is the only way into the Father's love. And he will close that gate. And what does a shepherd do? A shepherd would lie down and sleep in front of the gate. Anybody coming to steal those sheep, to threaten those sheep, had to go through the shepherd. And the shepherd was willing to lay his life down at all costs to protect the sheep in the pen. So next time you're tossing and turning, do we get him? Do we understand he's offering us peace and rest? We need to just step into that pen of God's love and allow Jesus to close the gate and just lie down in front of us. What does it take to live a great life? Is it a good night's sleep? A lot of people will tell you it takes money. If I had unlimited amounts of money, I'd have a good life. I'd be stress-free, worry-free, whatever. Some people say it's good looks. I know how that feels. It's really hard being my wife's arm candy every day, but I do the best I can. Some people say it's having a purpose, a soul mission in life, or having a set of goals that you're constantly striving for, and to have that personal satisfaction of checking off that to-do list every day, that sense of accomplishment. But people that have all those things, money, good looks, goal setters, they still struggle in life, because there's always something missing until you get him, until you get Jesus into your heart. Jesus said, I am the true vine. You see, Jesus came to give us a faith-filled, vibrant, fruit-filled life. The vine is like a tree trunk or a stalk of a tomato plant. And from that vine goes what? Branches. And where does the fruit sit? The fruit hangs from the branches. And you know what kind of tree or plant it is, what kind of vine it is, by the fruit it produces. If you see a tomato, it's a tomato plant. If you see an orange, it's an orange tree. In our lives, when Jesus says, I am the true vine, he's saying, quit chasing money and fame and all this other stuff and seek him. And when you let the life come forth from the vine, you become that branch, an extension of Christ himself, and your life begins to bear what? Christ-like fruit. Fruit of goodness and compassion and mercy and giving. And we become known by what? The fruit we produce. So what fruit is your life producing today? Whatever your life is going on in your life and whatever things you're accomplishing and doing, that tells you what vine you're attached to. If you're just out there cranking out a lot of cash, you're attached to the money vine. If you're out there just trying to become famous and acknowledged and you want a bunch of likes and high fives, you're seeking that fame and attention. But if your life is out there focused on loving others and sharing God's message, you know you're tied to the right vine. That's what it really means to live. Jesus called people by their names. People that had never met them before, he called them by names, and it kind of set them back. How does this person know my name? He listened. He answered their questions. He healed them. He taught them. He ate with them and ate with the sinners, and anybody that wanted to come to the table, he was there. He wanted to draw everybody to the vine of life. A great life is living in the presence of Jesus. Fulfilling God's purpose for your life means no comparisons. You don't look around at every other single person's life and compare yours to them. Who has it better or who has it worse? You are solely attached to the vine. There is no comparisons. There are no jealousies. It's just about being who God made you to be. Because he made each of us so special and unique, he has a singular purpose for each of our lives. And we need to stay close to the vine. Do we get him? Are we close to the vine? In John 15:5 is where he said it. He said, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Because apart from me, you can do nothing. What happens when a branch gets pruned from the vine or the tree and cast aside? Shrivels up and turns brown pretty quick. It can no longer produce fruit because it's separated itself from its source of life. And we need to stay connected to the vine through prayer and through worship and allow Jesus to fulfill us with life-filling, fruit-producing blessings. Jesus is the Good Shepherd. He laid down his life for us on a cross. And the crazy thing about it is, he didn't wait for us to clean ourselves up. He didn't say, go get cleaned up, get all the dirt and mud off of you, shake off all the addictions, all the mental issues, all the hatred, the way you think. Come as you are. Just come right now. I'll clean you up. I'll put the pieces back together. In Romans 5:7-8, it's very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person. Though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. Might possibly dare. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Think about that. Christ died for you. For us in this room, we weren't even born yet. But he already knew us. He already knew how he was going to create us in our mother's womb. He knew all of our faults and failures. He also knew all the good things he had planned for us. But he didn't wait for us to clean ourselves up and do it on our own. He died and allowed his blood to wash us and make us pure in the Father's eyes. Do we get him? Do we really understand what he did for us? We all want personal freedom, right? We all want to be out on our own, doing our own thing, no one telling us what to do, until we get lost. Till we get lost. Then we got to find our way home. Well, Jesus came to rescue the one who's lost. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. It doesn't matter about the 99 sheep. If one's out there gone, he's coming to find us to pull us back into the flock. It doesn't matter that the woman in the house had 10 coins and looked down and had 9. She'd lost one. She didn't say, well, I still got 9. What'd she do? She turned that house upside down, cleaning, looking for that lost one. And that's what Jesus is out there doing every day. He's looking for the lost. And he's asking us to partner in that as part of the Great Commission to go find disciples and bring them to the cross. He'll do the heavy lifting. He's the only one that can forgive sins. But he's asking us to help clean the house, to help find the sheep and point them back to the pen. You can't outrun Jesus, so you might as well just stop running. and you might as well just turn around because he's right there waiting for you with open arms. Do we get him yet? Do we really get who he was? Jesus made 7 statements in the Bible about who he was, and they're called the 7 I am statements. 7 times Jesus says, I am, and he filled in the blank. Those 7 statements are, he said, I am the bread of life. That is where our true spiritual nourishment comes from. He said, I am the light of the world. Number 3, I am the door. Number 4, I am the real vine. Number 5, I am the good shepherd. Number 6, I am the resurrection and the life. And finally, number 7, I am the way, the truth, and the life. In John chapter 14, Jesus was telling his disciples before he made his final ascension into heaven, he says, I'm going to prepare a place for you, and you will follow me and come. Now, he always spoke in such ways the disciples really didn't always understand what he was saying, but there was always doubting Thomas that got the bad rap for asking the questions. He was the one kid in the classroom that always got a question, over here, got a question. The other disciples didn't understand either, but they were sometimes like us, afraid to ask a hard question out of fear of what? Being embarrassed, maybe looking a little dumb, or I'm the only one that didn't get it. But not doubting Thomas. Thomas was never afraid to ask the question to the benefit of all of us. And he asked Jesus, how do we know the way? We don't even know where you're going. What are you talking about? And Jesus replied in John 14:6 when he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He made it clear, I'm going to see my Father in heaven, and the only way to you to get there is through me, is to follow me. I will show you the way. It's not through good works. It's not about being a good person. Do we get him? It's not about religion. It's about a relationship. It's not about laws and rules and checking all the boxes. It's about being born again, not of flesh, but spiritually being born again. Following Jesus is acting like Jesus. Being a Christian means to be Christ-like. If I'm going to go on a health and fitness trip, I'm not taking advice from somebody that's out of shape and overweight. I'm not taking any fitness advice, any nutritional advice from those people because they don't represent and look like where I'm trying to go. And as Christians, we got to change our lives. And when people look at us, they go, I see Jesus in them. That's why it's important. I want to be like that. Otherwise, they see somebody that says, they're no different than I am. They're just out there doing what the rest of the world does. What's so special about this? If I want to get in shape, I want a personal trainer that looks in shape. I want a guy that looks the part. And that's what we need to do. We need to start looking the part, and we need to show the love of Jesus. In closing today, I'm going to share a story about a pastor. It's a story we've probably all heard, but a story from years ago. There was a pastor that was getting ready to head a brand new church up. It was a big, big church in a big city, 10,000 people in a big auditorium. And he was named the new pastor. On the Sunday he was going to be introduced as the new pastor, he dressed up like a homeless guy. Put on the stocking cap, the raggedy clothes, the shoes with his big toe sticking out, and put dirt and mud all over him. And he showed up to church 30 minutes before service, and he walked around the parking lot. As 10,000 people came in to park in their cars in their Sunday best to meet the new pastor. And the new pastor was dressed as a homeless guy, walking around the parking lot, introducing himself not as a pastor, just saying hi. And he was asking for some change, for some food. Out of 10,000 people, he said not one single person even gave him some loose change. And as he walked around just saying hi to people, most people ignored him and looked away. He said out of everybody for that entire 30 minutes walking that parking lot, only 3 people even said hello to him, even acknowledged he was there. They looked the other way to get into the church. They avoided him. Well, as church service was getting ready to start, he walked into the church and he went to the front row and he sat down right in the front row in front of the stage. Here's this homeless guy sitting in the front row of this massive congregation. And what happened? An usher came up to him and asked him if he would kindly follow him and moved him to the back row. So now he's sitting on the back row watching his new church. And they do the worship songs, they go through the weekly announcements, and then the head of the church board gets up and gets the microphone and says, we're all excited today. We're here to welcome our brand new pastor. And he calls them up there, and everybody starts clapping and looking around. Where is he? Homeless man stands up from the back and begins to walk down the center aisle, and the clapping began to slow down, and people were looking at each other. And he walks up on the stage, takes the microphone, he hugs the head of the church board who was in on it. He knew what was going to happen. And he turned to face his congregation, which was now dead quiet. And he paused, and he just looked at them for a while. And he recited Matthew 25, 34 through 40. He said, then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer to him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison or go to visit you? Then the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. After he recited this, he looked toward his congregation and told them everything he had experienced that morning. And many began to cry, and many heads were bowed in shame. He then said, today I see a gathering of people, not a church of Jesus Christ. The world has enough people, but not enough disciples. When will you decide to become a disciple? He then dismissed the service until next week. Do we get him? Do we really get what Jesus' purpose was now? Being a Christian is more than something you claim. It's something you live by and share with others. As we go forth this week, let us take that lesson to heart, that if we really are going to get Jesus and call ourselves followers of him, we need to start producing the fruit. We need to look the part. We're the only Bible some people ever read. And we need to go out into a hurting world and start herding some sheep. Have a blessed week, and we'll see you next Wednesday.